Hi, I'm Dennis Griffith, pastor of Grace Covenant Presbyterian Church in Williamsburg, Virginia. During this time that the coronavirus is causing a potential threat to the health of anyone, and people are being forced to isolate themselves for their own safety, there is also an impact that we are told that it is having on the mental health. The worry of the possibility of catching the virus, the effect that it's having on the economy, and particularly as those who are hoping for retirement or have recently retired, the impact that it might have on friends. And then there's another impact of the social isolation that is having on mental health as well. And so during this time, we've decided that we wanted to find some creative ways where we can both communicate with our congregation and other friends, as well as share some information that might be of benefit to anyone who is watching. And so I've invited two friends to come to share their insights on the mental health impact that the isolation is having. We have with us today Mark Mortier, who is the lead counselor at Genesis Counseling Center, and Isaiah Day, who is a licensed counselor at Newtown Counseling Center here in Williamsburg, both of whom are also members of Grace Covenant and leaders in different ministries. Mark leads our men's ministry, and Isaiah leads our worship and music ministry. And so I invited them here today, and I'm going to ask them a couple of broad questions, and then we can also hear from them the insights that they have, both from their present experience and what to expect perhaps as the isolation is expected to linger on for at least a few more weeks. Mark and Isaiah, thank you for joining me here today. In the newspaper this morning, there was a statement that says this: while coronavirus pandemic continues to isolate people in their homes, it's also taken a toll on their mental health. Can you share some ways in which you have either you're seeing this happen or that you anticipate seeing this happen, that the social distancing is causing an impact on people's mental health?
Yeah, I can answer that, Dennis. It's such a quick change that it's really been hard for people to make that adjustment. I think people have done what they can do to seek out family and talk with friends and do what they can, get out and walk and other things, but it's still very, very limiting. And people are fearful about how much can I go out and what can I do. So, we're certainly seeing it in the counseling office, people wanting to talk about their experience and wanting to talk about the changes. And I think I also see it personally in just, adapting to it myself, but also seeing family members wanting to call and talk and connect in different ways. And with the advent of Zoom and things like that, even our small groups and other things are happening electronically, but it's just not the same as person to person.
Isaiah, you work a lot with teens and youth in addition to others that you meet. Are you seeing the impact on the younger as well as older?
Yeah, for sure. A lot of the kids that I'm working with, and just families in general, are adapting, like Mark said, to the sudden change. Now suddenly the kids are all home for the entirety of the day, so if both parents were working, suddenly they have to make either childcare arrangements or one parent has to change something about their work situation. I know one mom I worked with said specifically that during the summer the same thing happens, but there are programs, there are summer camps that the kids can go off to during the day when the parents are working, and that's just not available right now. So there's a lot of mental health as well as really real financial and family struggles going on because of these rapid changes.
Now, is this impacting people who have not previously had issues of mental health, or is that manifesting itself in people bringing new concerns up?
Well, there are some people that are seeking counseling even now. We're working especially with the people that we've worked with for some time, and they're needing support. But there may be people that need extra help during this time, and certainly our social network of helping people just with financial and other needs is kind of rising, I think, to the challenge. But there's a lot of need out there.
I would also say that those who are vulnerable beforehand, or those who previously maybe didn't have any mental health concerns, some of our normal coping strategies are taken away from us because either people enjoyed being out with their friends or playing sports or being part of activities that kept them busy and allowed them to handle some of the stresses that they experienced. And suddenly that gets taken away. Either people are finding new ways to cope or they're seeking help or seeking, like you said, social support, however they can, to take the place of what's suddenly gone missing.
Now, recognizing that every circumstance is different, can you give some general ideas? What would you say to somebody who's finding themselves anxious or fearful, maybe on the front end of it, and maybe this is a new experience for them? What would be some things that you would tell them to identify in themselves, and what are some things they can do to control their emotions?
Of course, as Christians, focusing on our faith in the Lord and that God is walking through this with each of us and each family, that, He's a God of comfort that is right here with us. If we start to feel like we're on a tightrope and it's just us, I think that's when we're very vulnerable. But, focusing on what the Lord is in our lives, also just watching things like too much news, too much information, these are things that we struggle with. And if you're getting too much of that can be very upsetting and hard to digest each day.
Tell me, why is watching too much news actually harmful?
I think it tends to stir up fear, and just sometimes the way it's presented, it's very upsetting. So looking for facts and information that we need is one thing, but hearing it over and over again can be very difficult.
I'll add something onto that too. One thing that I've thought of as, I've thought about how Christians deal with anxiety or how we approach it, given the commands in the Bible not to fear, to not be anxious. In sports, we're taught that we direct our eyes to where we want to throw a ball, and our eyes direct our trajectory. So if we're focusing on the news or on the fear or on the uncertainty, then that begins to guide our actions and our decision making instead of the Bible, instead of God's word. And so when we are confronted with the unknown, we want to have information, but when we seek it obsessively, that becomes our guidance and that becomes our direction. So actually in your sermon a couple weeks back, when you referenced Chalmers's expulsive power of a new affection, I saw an article that John Piper wrote about, he had a question: if you had a state-of-the-art lab, what would be the best way to remove the air from a glass beaker? And it's not any technology, but it's by filling it with water. So if we can replace our fear with affection for Jesus, and by turning our eyes to Jesus, that helps us as Christians to mitigate that fear, to put that fear in its proper place. And the way that I would suggest, or that I would talk about doing that, is by the means of grace that we've been given by God, praying, reading the Bible, communing with believers however we can, everyday acts of worship and serving those around us. Those are all ways that we form and cultivate habits that turn our eyes back to Jesus and focus and put our fears where they should be.
Great. Well, I thank you for sharing your insights. I'm going to give you opportunity for the final word. Any last thoughts that you would have, advice you would give to somebody that is facing this or wants to encourage friends or family members that are beginning to show signs of emotional wear and tear during this time?
Well, obviously, we should be watching out for each other and offering encouragement. But a very pointed strategy is, when we're trying to manage our thoughts in our mind and stay focused on the Lord, is to write out the scriptures that really mean something to us, to write out the key words of trusting, of God's comfort, and to really stay focused on that. You may have to read it to yourself 100 times a day to keep from going into anxiety, but to really keep our mind focused on that. I think Christian music and other things are helpful too, and just the positive exchanges with people that we can have. One of the things that's come out of this is kind of the drive-by, where you drive by your family or other people and you stop and you roll down the windows and you chat for a little bit, but you don't get out. And those kind of things have been very helpful. So finding what we can do, but keeping our minds stayed on the Lord is the real strategy that I think is going to help us through this.
And a concept that a secular psychotherapist, Lori Gottlieb, who writes for The Atlantic, she writes about a concept that she teaches to her clients called the both and, which allows us to reconcile, in, I guess, Christian terminology, the fallenness of the situation as well as the redemptive potential. So she talks about in her own life that she can say to her son, "I'm so glad you're here with me," even though the reason for him being home is horrible. And so that concept, allowing there to be both fallenness and suffering and pain right now, and the potential for us to live presently and take advantage of the time that we've been given, that allows us to live presently instead of dwelling on the potentially catastrophic futures or what might come the next day. So that's from a secular psychotherapist. That could be really helpful for Christians and for non-Christians alike, thinking through something doesn't have to be just purely a bad situation or purely a good situation. There's an element of both in this time.
Great. Well, thank you both for coming and joining me today to answer these questions. No one has any idea how long this is going to last, and so if this endures certainly more than a couple more weeks, I anticipate we'll invite you back to talk about different things, and that people might be experiencing things that you're seeing, and give you an opportunity to share with the congregation how they may keep their heads and their emotions and their focus during this time. So again, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I hope this brief conversation has been of some encouragement and maybe even some help to you. One thing I want to emphasize is this: if you find yourself struggling, please don't keep it to yourself. Give us a call at the church, shoot us an email, contact a counselor, whether it's Mark or Isaiah or any other reputable counselor that you may know, and let them know, because we are all in this together. I also want to say a little bit further, for those who are struggling because of finances, our deacons at Grace Covenant are helping our church members and others in the community. So if you have a need, please don't go under, but let us know, and if we're able to, we would be delighted to help. And then finally, we will be continuing to find different ways in which we can communicate to you. And so I would expect that we'll invite both Mark and Isaiah back and maybe have them individually at times to communicate with you. And we'll find some other ways that we can be of encouragement to you. And so check back, and we will look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day.